Good evening.
Evening, sir.
Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Welcome to the next session. So, now we are going on the next session on a scientific approach in dealing with the Upanishads. As I said in the beginning, when we started the lessons, um, or when we started the classes rather, not lessons, that when I say scientific, what I am trying to say is science, according to me, I think you will also agree with this, is not merely confined to the study of material objects. There are many other sciences which study things which are beyond our scope of understanding through our five senses. We discussed this in the beginning. First is the mind. The mind cannot be put in a test tube. So, the study of the mind has to be done scientifically, which means systematically, logically, uh, rationally, but that does not mean that it is something which can be measured with an instrument. We can't even, as I said, you know this, we can't even see or pick up a quantum unit by any means physically known. We cannot say therefore that the quantum units do not exist, but all that you see in this world and all you do not see also many physical matter so called is ultimately made up of these units, quantum units, which in their pure form are not visible to us. You can't put them in a test tube. You can't have a, you surmise that they exist, and which is true, they exist. How do we come to conclusion? Because of their reactions. In highly charged field, they react in a certain manner. So therefore, we say, oh, these are, and we also know that nobody knows if they are particles or waves, because they seem to change from particle to wave and wave to particle, which has even prompted some scientists to say that perhaps it depends on the observer. Now, why I am saying this is because in the science, in the I would say science, in the science of the study of the Upanishads and also the corollary to it, which is the science of yoga, which uh, explores the mind. And from there, consciousness is basically a study of that observer more than that which is observed. And the observer is me. You and me are the observers. We see the world, we deal with it. And this observer has been very little studied, of course, in modern times. Psychology and psychiatry, neurology, and neuroscience has gone to a great extent studying these. I am of the opinion that 1,000 years ago, already a deep study has been made on this. And this is what is contained in the ancient texts on yoga and the Upanishads. I'm explaining again because lest we miss this. Because I'm going to the next Upanishad, we were looking at one. So keep this in mind as you go through uh, these sessions. Keep this in mind. Um, the ancient scientists, who we call Rishis, were the scientists of the mind and that which is beyond ordinary sight, came out with two important, uh, I won't say conclusions, yeah, we can say conclusions. Because why I don't say conclude? Because once you conclude, then you can't change it. It's concluded. Not that way. They found out, discovered that all things cannot be known through the five senses. There may be things which are beyond the reach of our five senses. because our five senses are also limited in their capacity to explore. How far can we see with, let's take one. How far can we see with our eyes? There's a limit to it. Now, when you cannot see beyond a certain limit, what do we do? Suppose I'm sitting in a nice, quiet place near the mountains, near the hills somewhere, and I see a kingfisher fly by. And it flies almost close to my range of vision. And then it's gone and it's sitting far away. I can't see it, but I sense it. It is sitting there. How do I look at it? Binoculars or telescope. Nowadays, nobody uses the telescope, but binoculars. So with the binos, I adjust and I focus, and there sits the kingfisher in all its blue glory. Hmm. So my eyes, without the help of this binos, could not have seen that kingfisher, except a hint of it as it flies. In the same way, ears. Beyond a certain range, my ears cannot go. Hmm. Um, Even if I hear the sound of a bell, for instance, after a while, the bell rings and then it slowly echoes into the background. And then at some point, I say the bell has stopped ringing. Physically, it has already stopped ringing, but the sound of the bell can still be heard for some time. It kind of resounds in you till your ears reach the limit of its capacity, of their capacity, and you cannot hear it anymore. Does it mean that the sound has stopped? No. There may be creatures with more sensitive ears who can probably still hear the sound in different. There is something called a dog whistle. Dog can hear it, we can't hear it. And there are certain electronic sounds that come nowadays, they use it against mosquitoes and so on. You cannot hear the sound, something is going on. The mosquito can hear it and it avoids it. So, all I'm trying to say that the instruments of perception, which are called panchendriyas in the ancient sciences, are not equipped to understand beyond a certain limit. Now the rishis say, or the yogis say, that in the human instrument, or called the human system, apart from these five instruments of perception, there are other instruments of perception which generally are not active in most people, which can be activated through special experiments and exercises. Like I said the other day, 20% of our brains normally working. So that means there is still 80% of the brain which we don't need for our daily life or anything of that sort. What do these parts do? There must be some function. The yogis say that these are potentially instruments of sensation and observation which can be activated for one to be able to feel what is beyond the ordinary five senses. That's part one. I'm saying all this because we are doing the Upanishads, which basically are looking at this. Things which we don't understand with our ordinary, like beyond this life, when the body dies, is there life? Kathopanishad, that is one of the central questions. And how one-pointed attention is required to figure out these matters, and how the state of mind is linked to the knowledge that you get. Not in physical sciences. You can be Because I won't say you can be drunk and still do experiments. I cannot say that. But even how your mind situation is may not have a great reflection on the instruments which you use. But in this case, it is not so because we are dealing with the mind. And therefore, the brain has to be in a perfect order so that it can look into these matters. And it should also have enough energy and not waste any energy for other purposes because we are looking at something which is really very, very serious. And when I say serious, I mean very important, and therefore you need all your energy out there. So a mind which is numbed or a central nervous system which is paralyzed by alcohol or other substances chemically available cannot dream of looking into these matters. Although temporarily one might have a glimpse sometimes of something beyond because the central nervous system has stopped functioning. That's not what we are aiming to do. We are trying in yogic science to sharpen the nervous system rather than dull it so that it sees things in its proper perspective. So before we go into the body of the Upanishad, the Kathopanishad, one more thing I would like to discuss. What is one of the most important instruments of perception that we have are the eyes. Right? We all love the eyes. When the eyes are bad, then it's terrible. Even when you can't read and you're looking for specs, you think, good God. Then you get it and then you start reading. We live largely by sight. I would say nowadays sight and taste, largely by this. If I see something, if it's pleasant and nice, I'm attracted to it. Eyes, color, nice color. I say, this is very nice. Um, you know how long one waits to get the color of the car that you choose. I know some people don't care, but there are people who say, okay, I'll wait till January, it doesn't matter. I want a black car or a red car or whatever. Color is so important. Look at the color of the dresses that we wear. Uh, how long do we stand before the mirror and see if it fits us? In the morning when we wake up, what do we do in front of the mirror on top of the wash basin? Adjust our hair, see how everything is. Of course, the ladies spend more time perhaps because they like butterflies, but even men stand and look. Everything is okay. In fact, I think even women don't carry combs in their pockets. It's the men. Vanity. So eyes are so important. Yeah. Now, such an important, you look at somebody and you get your impression, first impression. Right? Now, how reliable is, let's only look at the eyes now. We're talking Vedanta, don't think I'm diverting. We have to have a base before we get, that is the idea, to have a scientific approach. So, this instrument of perception, the sight, eye, which is so important. How accurate is this? Or how correct is this in judging the world or looking at the objects that we have in physical world we're talking about? You know what are optical illusions? You see something, but it is actually not that. It's something else. This is called an optical illusion. Right? This is the instrument of perception which we depend so much upon can also see illusions and think they're real, which is what optical illusion actually means. Okay. Now, simple fact. every morning, if I wake up in time, I know many people don't wake up so early nowadays because they work in the night too late and so on. But suppose you wake up onto a beautiful morning, all mornings are beautiful. You see the sunrise. And in the evening, the sun sets. It's a fact. I mean, this is what my eyes tell me. My most important instruments of perception tell me that the sun rises and the sun sets. Okay. But do you really does the sun rise and set, or is it the earth turning? Even a high school student will tell you, no. It's actually this earth turning. It's not the sun. But we see it with our eyes every day. How reliable are these instruments of perception, even to see the physical world? If I have to look at a microbe, I can't see with my eyes. I need that microscope. Even an ordinary optical microscope cannot see a microbe. You need an electron microscope. But even an electron microscope can only go up to that. It cannot see an atom, for instance. How reliable are these instruments of perception? I know you're waiting for the Kathopanishad, but I want to fix the background before, kind of an introduction before we go into it. Otherwise, we can read Kathopanishad, finish it. One session I can get out. That's not the intention. Intention is that I make you think, that you go home and think. Food for thought. I want you to think and say, are there other ways of looking at things than what we have been told are the only ways of looking at things? If I can get that thought process on in these young minds, the world is blessed, I'm telling you. Then you look into this and you'll find out for yourself wonderful things which you never thought existed. It will be like the opening up of the world when the microscope was first invented. And then nobody saw this wonderful world. We are saying, can we open up other instruments of perception and see a wondrous world beyond the ordinary? Or another level of consciousness, which the conscious mind in its waking state. Now, if you say waking state, you'll understand. We did the Mandukya Upanishad. Cannot understand. So, this is the intent. So, I'm going to begin the Kathopanishad. It is not a scholarly study of the Kathopanishad. It's basically meant to put some, what you call, a stimulant into your brain or the mind, whatever you want, so that you begin to think differently. So we are going to enter a psychedelic world without drugs. Okay. So the Kathopanishad. Now the Kathopanishad, it's also called the Upanishad. It comes from the Turiya school of the Yajurveda. You don't have to worry about all that. Technically, tomorrow some Pandit will tell you, oh, did he say what it comes from? So, say it's from the Turiya section of the Yajurveda. That's all you need to say. Okay. So what happens in this? First, he starts with the Shanti mantra, which I think we discussed. If you haven't, please tell me. Sahana Vavatu, Sahanao Bhanaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti. We discussed this in the beginning of the session, right? Yes or no? Didn't we do the Sahana Vavatu?
Yes.
Professor? Huh? One of your students, if you say yes, then I'll agree.
Yes, sir. We did
Yes,
it. We
yes.
did it.
Great.
Yes,
Thank you.
sir.
Okay, okay, got it. So now we are having a dialogue. Good. So after chanting this Sahana Avavatu, begins the Upanishad. Now before that, let's give a small sum up. I've noted it down here. There's a poor and pious Brahmana. Brahmana means one who is engaged in understanding the Brahman, the Supreme Being, performs a sacrifice. His name was Vajashravasa. You don't have to by heart the names. His name was Vajashravasa. Vajashravasa performs a sacrifice. And after the sacrifice, he gives all kinds of presents to the priests who officiated in the sacrifice. Sacrifice, we won't go into that now. What we call sacrifice here is a yajna. Now, yajna is like a huge lab. There are all kinds of people working on various things. Basically, they're dealing with fire. And therefore, all the priests, so-called priests, who have come to perform the yajna, they're all participants in this whole experiment. What is being done and what is produced and what is the result, what is the phala of the yajna. So at the end of the sacrifice, or end of the yajna, they have to be given gifts, naturally. So Vajashravasa gives useless cows and things which he does not need as gifts to the Brahmana, to the officiating priests. He has a young son whose name is Nachiketas. Now Nachiketas is quite disturbed. What kind of a gift are these when valueless gifts being given to people who are there to perform such a valuable exercise here? So he asked him, why are you giving this things which are useless to you? Old 1999 ambassador lying in the shed. To the point, who is going to drive this? Who are you giving this? Huh? Incidentally, it used to be a beautiful car. Let's forget it now. Uh, would you give something that you are fond of? Then it becomes a sacrifice. I'm fond of something and I give it, then it's a sacrifice. So Nachiketas says to Vajashravasa, his father, I am your nearest and dearest. You have only one child, I am the only son. I am closest to you. Who will you give me to? Or can you do that? Give me. See what sacrifice actually means. That's what we're trying to look at. Who will you give me to? Now, 2, 3 times he asked the question. Some commentators say Vajashravasa got upset. This young fellow is asking such questions to his own father. So in anger he said, I give you away to death. Some commentators say what Vajashravasa said was, I will give you away to death so that you can find out what death is all about and figure out the secret of what an yajna actually means. What is yajna? Sacrifice. Something is put into the fire and some result is supposed to come out of it. So there are differing commentaries on this. Or let's say that he said, I give you away to death. Whether he was angry or not angry or for an experimental purpose, we don't know. Let's leave it there. So, since Vajashravasa is a great rishi who has certain power over his words and who only said things which he should say and not things which he should not say, a great yogi said that if you don't utter a single lie for 12 years of your life, even when you say something which is not true, it will turn out to be true. In the same way, when Vajashravasa said, I give you away to death, little Nachiketas found himself in Yamaraj's court. He died. So the whole story, the narrative about death in the Vedas is that there is the Lord of Death called Yama. Let's take it as a story for the time being, symbolically. The Lord of Death is sitting in his office, supposed to sit in an office, and his people go and bring a soul there, and nobody dies. Physical body is dead, and then he judges them according to their whatever procedure and so on. Now, this Yamaraj, the Lord of Death, was caught unawares. He had gone to get some soul somewhere or for some conference, we don't know what. The UN didn't exist then. Anyway, he had gone there, and this poor Nachiketas suddenly appeared in his office. So he had to be in the waiting room for 3 days. He waited in his office for 3 days. Yama came back after 3 days, and he was very upset. Even the Lord of Death is upset about some things. What is that? One, that there is this young brahmachari with a shining face, full of tejas, who has come to my office. He is waited for 3 days. Nobody has asked him, did you have water to drink or food to eat? 3 days he's been waiting for me. It's a terrible thing. So the Lord of Death, being very concerned about making this young man wait here, says to him, in compensation for the 3 days where you have sat here, where you were not treated like a guest, nobody even asked you, did you have water to drink? Compensation for the 3 days of waiting, I give you 3 boons. Ask. Ask for 3 boons. You get it. Now, if the Lord of Death, suppose, is there in front of us and says, ask me for 3 boons, I will give you what will we ask. So, this little Nachiketas, who is already a rishi's son, has already studied the Vedas, who understands many things. Otherwise, he wouldn't have even asked the question in the first place. He says, first request, first boon that I ask for. Let me return back to my father alive. You have crossed the border, you have died. Let me go back alive. Okay? Yama says, okay, done. Normally not possible, but done. Boon 2, tell me how my ishtapurta, how my good works, whatever good that I have done, the fruits of it are not exhausted. My ishtapurta. Let my good deeds that I have done, the virtuous effects of that become inexhaustible. They are not exhausted. Can you grant me that? Yes, granted. Two almost impossible things, granted. Third, he says, tell me the way to conquer re-death. I said, instead of rebirth, the word used in the Upanishad is punar mrityu, not punar janma. That means, is there something in me which when I find, I can be free of the fear of death and be immortal? Naturally, the physical body can never be. Is there something which will make me immortal? Can I come to a state where I will not die again? So it includes rebirth, of course, but that's where Yama hesitates. Two things are granted easily. Third one, Yama hesitates, and then we'll read the Upanishad. Okay? See what happens to Nachiketas and how. Now I need glasses. I told you, yogis also need glasses. That print is so small in my text. Little bit I'll read in Sanskrit, then afterwards we'll take out to English because I like the sound. You know, the sound is as good as the words, what's being said. Ushana avai vajashravasah sarvavedasam dadau tasyaha nachiketa nama putra asa. Now, if you know most Indian languages, you would have guessed what it's trying to say. Desirous of achieving the fruit of the great yajna called Vishvajit. What is the meaning of the word Vishvajit? Winning over the universe. Vishvajit. Which is what everyone is doing even today, trying to win over the universe, whole universe. I want everything. Not enough if I have a little. The whole Vishwa should be mine. I should be the conqueror of the entire world. I mean, this is the ultimate desire that all human beings have. Maybe small, it may be big. Vishwa. And Vishwa need not mean the entire world. Your world also is your Vishwa. So, desirous of inheriting the entire universe, getting power over the whole universe, Vajashravasa, the Rishi, performed the Vishvajit sacrifice. And what did he do? He gave away all that he had possessed as a sacrifice. Tasyaha Nachiketa nama putra asa. He had a son by name Nachiketas. Now we must understand the word Nachiketas is derived from the Sanskrit root Nachiketaha. You know, there is no word in Sanskrit which is meaningless. Uh, every noun is made up of a verb. It's not a meaningless sound, Nachiketas. Means Nachiketa, one who does not know. Which means to study this Upanishad, you have to start with the attitude, I don't know. Let me figure out. Because if I already formed conclusions, one cannot look into the Upanishad. One has to go without conclusion and saying, I don't know. Nachiketas didn't know about death when he was trying to find out what it is. Therefore, he is named also Nachiketa, one who does not know. Anyway, in the story is a small boy called Nachiketas, the son of Vajashravasa. Tamha Kumaram, this young man, Santam, Dakshinasu, Niyamanasu, Shraddha Vivesha, so Manyata. As the gifts were being taken by the priests, something entered into this boy, Shraddha. Shraddha entered into him, though he was merely a small boy, and he thought, what is Shraddha? I don't know if how many of you might have gone to Shirdi or something. Maybe not. But there are two things written on either side of the gate as you enter. One is Shraddha, and the other is Saburi. Both are so essential for us to study, understand, or live in this world. Shraddha means one pointed attention and the feeling that there is much more to know. We don't know anything. Shraddha. People have variously translated it as faith and so on. I don't take that definition. Not just faith. It's the one pointed attention needed to understand something which comes from the understanding that you are Nachiketas, one who does not know. Saburi, of course, means patience. Is not mentioned here, so we don't want to go into that. Although patience is very important for anything. So, Shraddha, the feeling of Shraddha entered into this boy, entered into him, even though he was a little boy, a mere boy. And so he thought to himself. So, amanyata, he thought to himself in his mind. Itodaka, jagdhatrana, dugdha doha, nirindriya, anandanamate lokas, tansa gacchati tadat. These cows, these cattle which my father is giving away, as supposed to be gifts for the sacrifice, they're water drunk, they're grass eaten, they're milked, that means they're milkless, their strength spent, joyless, sorry, their strength spent. Joyless are those worlds to which he who presents such cows goes. If this is what you are offering, then you will go to a joyless world. But you are offering things which are useless, which have lost their energy. It's also a sounding that this is the age where you're sitting now, when you need to enter the portals of the understanding of the Upanishads, not when your energy is all spent, not when your hair becomes my color, my hair color. Well, I could have used a dye, but I don't. So, what I'm trying to say is, Nachiketas then said, where will you enter? Which world will you go when you give such useless things away? Which also means when you enter the portals of understanding, the Upanishad, you should still be possessed of all your energy, not spent. Very milk, not milked away. Food, which means nutrition still on. Sahana bhunaktu, maybe be nourished. Mm. So he said, so what use is this kind of writing? Their water drunk, their grass eaten, their milk milked, their strength spent. If this is the thing that you have to offer, joyless are those worlds to which you would go. Saho vacha pitaram. Then he told his father, Tatha, Tatha, kasmai mam dasyasiti. Said to his father, Sir, sire, to whom will you give me? I am your dearest possession. Whom will you give me? Saho vacha pitaram. He said to his father, Tatha, kasmai mam dasyasiti. Whom will you give me to? What did he didn't say once. Dvitiyam, Tritiyam. 2, 3 times he repeated the same thing. So the Upanishad says of that got quite irritated. And he said, Tam ho vacha mritve tva dadhamiti. So when he repeated the third time, his father said, Unto death shall I give you. To death shall I give you. Two things to be understood. One is people who think they are wise don't like to be told they are foolish. Right? To be remembered. His father didn't like him. If suppose you consider him as normal like us. And the second is that he probably understood that Nachiketas was asking the right question, but he had no answer to it. In that state, he said, I give you away to death. Now, this fifth shloka is important to show that probably Vajashravasa was not saying this in anger, but was sending him to the court of the Lord of Death to find out more mysteries of life. Because Nachiketas then says to himself, Bahunam emi pratamaha, bahunam emi madhyamaha, kim swid yamasya kartavyam yan mayadhya karishyati. Why is my father? What duty towards the Lord of Death has my father to accomplish today that he wants to accomplish through me? Of many, the first sentence means of many sons or disciples, I am going as the first. My father has many disciples. Why does he send me the first to death? I also go as the middling because I am in the middle. What duty towards Yama that my father has to accomplish? That he wants to accomplish through me. Why is he sending me? Okay. And then Nachiketas also says, this is very interesting to note, about how in this world everything keeps changing. The sixth slokas, Anupashya yatha purve, pratipashya tatha pare, sasyam iva martya pachyate, sasyam iva jayate punaha. That means consider how it was with our forefathers, like our forefathers. Behold how it is with other men who came afterwards. A human mortal, a mortal, ripens like corn, and like corn is born again. Now, this imagery is very interesting. Just as corn comes onto the plant, it ripens and is used by as food. It doesn't end there. New corn is born, and that is also eaten. It's a continuous process. Nachiketa is thinking of life and death as the ripening of corn and being used. Again, new corn comes and is being used. That is the imagery, which means it's not ending. The corn is not ending when it is eaten. New corn comes so that again it is eaten. And so on. Time keeps eating us. When I used to be eating food, my teacher used to tell me every time you eat food, remember one thing only, time is eating you. And nobody can beat that, right? How can we beat time? Maybe if you touch the timeless, but generally, how do we beat time? Time is eating us all the time. It's like the corn ripening, falling down. It's being used, more corn comes, again it's eaten. Life turns full circle all the time. That's why this supreme energy is also called Kala, time, Kala Vairav, terrible time, ferocious time. You know that it eats us all up. So, Nachiketas said, as with forefathers, as it happens to us, mortal ripens like corn, and like corn is born again. Now, the second section is about Nachiketas in the house of death. So, gone, all done. Poor Nachiketas packed off. So, you can either consider it as an allegory, and you can consider it whatever you want. Anyway, Nachiketas has gone to the house of death, Yama's place. Now, don't take the imagery of Yama so seriously. Take it a little more allegorically because this is the Upanishad. Upanishad deals with allegories to bring home the truth. Anyway, so going to tell you, there was a great uh, teacher in the north uh, whose name was Dayananda Saraswati, who started the Arya Samaj. In many areas in the north, Arya Samaj is very popular. They don't worship images and so on and so forth. They have havans every day performed, especially in the Punjab area. It's very popular, the Arya Samaj. Dayananda Saraswati, even though he was born in Gujarat. Even. Now, he's written a book which is in many ways very nice, but sometimes quite hilarious. It's called Satyartha Prakash. How do you translate Satyartha Prakash? The light of truth. So some places it's really hilarious. In one place he says, poor people who live in small huts, please don't worry about Yama, because he cannot enter your houses. Your doors are too small. Big buffalo with his horns cannot enter your doorway. So relax. You're not going to have trouble with Yama. I mean, he's joking, of course, saying that how sometimes images become more important than the reality. So anyway, so Nachiketas reaches the house of Yama, the Lord of Death. Vaishvanara pravishati atitir brahmano grihan rasyaitam shantim kurvanti hara vaivasvatodakam. As a very fire, this Brahmana guest enters the house. As the very fire, a Brahmana guest enters into houses, and people do his peace offering. They bring water. And it is addressed to the son of the sun, which means one who is really shining. Son of the sun means one who is like the sun, shining. So when a Brahmana, when I say Brahmana, I again explain to you, one who is completely absorbed in the process of finding the absolute truth, the Brahman, enters the house as a guest. People greet him and bring water to drink and ask, how are you? And so on. What do you want? So Nachiketas enters the house, here the office of Yama. Now what has happened? Then they say, if you don't welcome a guest like that into your house, Atiti Devo Bhava, a guest is God. If you don't welcome, especially one who is a great spiritual person with his face shining, who is engaged in the study of the Brahmana, if you don't welcome a person and give him water to drink and food to eat, these are the great principles of hospitality from time immemorial, which we have in this country. If you don't do that, then Asha Pratikshe Samagatam Sunratam Chestapurte Putra Pashumscha Sarvan. Hope and expectation, friendship and joy, sacrifices and good works, sons, cattle, and all are taken away from a person of little understanding, in whose house a guest remains unfed. How nice. There's such houses now. I would like to be a guest all the time. So the Upanishad says, Etad vrinakte purushassalyam pamadhesha deso yasya nasham vasati brahmano grihe. Everything is taken away from that person of little understanding, in whose house a guest is not fed, remains unfed. So take this as a good practice. If a guest, at least give a meal or give some water. And don't ask, I'm sure you must have had breakfast and come. So anyway, so this has actually happened. Nachiketas has gone to Yama's house. Yama is not there. He has not been welcomed as he should. So normally the host is supposed to lose everything. But Yama is the Lord of Death, so he probably doesn't. But it is a great mistake. It's a great, what shall we say, error. It's a great crime to not ask after a guest who has come to your house, especially a guest who is exalted, who is looking for the truth. So Yama comes back, finds this young man with a shining face sitting in the office, in his house, and he's very upset. Yama says to himself, what a mistake have I committed, Lord of Death. It says, since you, Tishro Ratriyad Avatsir, since thou, a vulnerable guest, has stayed in my house without food for 3 nights, I bow down to you. O Brahmana, may it be well with you. Therefore, in return, please choose 3 gifts. Ask for 3 boons, which I shall give you. Actually, Yama says to this young Nachiketas, Namaste stu Brahman. Oh, great Brahmana, Namaste. So I bow down to you, I prostrate before you. Swasti me astu. May it all be well with me. May I not lose everything. Tasmat prati trinavaran vrinishva. Ask me for 3 boons for having waited for 3 days without food, and I shall grant it to you. So Nachiketas' first wish. Nachiketas says, okay, no problem. I'm okay. He didn't say that. I mean, I'm saying, suppose I'm in his place. I said, okay, that's all fine. But I'm not about to curse you. You are the Lord of Death. So all that is fine. But give me the 3 boons. May I ask? This is the most important thing for me now. Why? Because I'm in search of truth. I'm not satisfied with anything else. So I ask for 3 boons. The first, that my father, Vajashravasa, is also called Gautama, which means the father, with allayed anxiety, with his anxiety gone, with his anger gone, may he be gracious to me, O death, and recognizing me. We will discuss that tomorrow, why he is worried that he may not be recognized. And recognizing me, greet me when set free by you. This I choose as the first gift of all the 3. Even though he asked an inconvenient question, Nachiketa is not upset with his father. He says, may he welcome me back, and so on. So we will discuss that. Start with Nachiketa's first question. So now we have a short question answer session. So we'll ask these Nachiketas what they sitting before me. I'm not Yamadeva, but I can try.
Good evening, sir.
Yes.
My question is, I will
Happy
just
late.
read out. Yeah, I will just read out the question. In the start of the lecture, you said that the rishis are kind of the scientists who like uh, read about, search about the mind. So as we are in the journey of realizing the faculties that would actually help us perceive the world beyond the 5 senses, right?
Right?
So if this had to be true, then there had to be a time where we actually had control of all the possible senses that is there, right? And if that be true, then why did we degenerate from that state? And since when the degeneration began? And since when the progress began?
Okay. So it's like this. That doesn't mean that at one time everybody was in possession of all the other instruments of perception. There were still only few who were in possession of it, right? Those who were in possession of it noted it down for the future generations to understand. See, this is also a question of evolution. Those days there were few people who knew about these matters, at least some of these matters. They noted it down for the future generations to understand, because they knew that humanity at that time in general, in average, had not reached that level of evolution to be able to understand this. So they wrote it down. Now, in the course of history, what has happened is, not being able to specify and understand what was written down, the average human beings, most interested only in the five senses, discarded it and said, no, let's look at something we can actually enjoy. What is all this brahmin business? So it went out of. See, today we have evolved now. I am very sure that we have evolved enough now, at least a large percentage of humanity, to be able to redevelop these functions which are already there. Why? In the ancient times, if somebody was told that he can fly from the air and drop down, they would have said it is a story. So they made all the Pushpa Vimana stories, that they are like chariots flying with wings. And now we have aeroplanes. We can understand that perhaps they had something by which they could come and go. Right. So the large part of humanity was not evolved enough to understand these matters. There were few exceptions. I don't want to go into who these exceptions were, then we'll have to go into those TV series like Matrix and so on. But anyway, there were some who had knowledge of this and who knew that at that time humanity was not ready to understand. There were some who could, very few. So they noted it down in textbooks and scrolls and kept it for the time to come when it would be unrolled again. Today we have reached that point, that is why we are trying very hard to make people understand. It is not a reverse thing. People think those days everybody was wise, now no. Now is the time when we can reopen and get back to that business, because we have all the tools essential. We have all, and we have the mind has now reached a state where it can understand such things. Imagine, suppose, I do not know whether there is any such place on earth now, but suppose there is a place hidden off somewhere in the Amazon forest somewhere, where they have not seen an aeroplane, right? And then an aeroplane crashes in there from our world, it crashes. Two people come out of it, they have managed to eject, they flew out, and they are wearing some masks and all that. What would they think? They think they are gods, right? So that time they had only reached that. Now we know. So now is the time to step forward and go back to those faculties which we have, which is why this has happened. Huh? Okay.
Yeah. So my question was that what I could understand, the cows that were given for the sacrifice, was it actually being referred to the materialistic wealth or possessions that we had? The father being the body and the Nachiketa being that soul who is curious enough to gain that knowledge of the absolute truth. Was that of a relation coming out of this Upanishad, or
No, not that, but first part of your question is correct. It referred to possessions, material possessions. A cow is a symbol of wealth in those days. The times you're talking about, the cow is a symbol of wealth. So it means, are you ready to go to any length to understand the truth? Because you're performing an yajna. Yajna is a sacrifice which is meant to raise you above normal, to achieve something. So to that achievement, are you ready to put everything into it? When you say put everything into it, are you ready to even be dispossessed of everything and find it? Now, this is not only applicable to spiritual pursuits. If you look into the lives of great scientists, some of them have gone to the greatest extent possible, not forgetting about their own comforts, to be able to find. Madame Curie died of radiation. Remember this. So, Karl Marx, not a Marxist, but Karl Marx wrote his Das Kapital, Das Kapital. 20 years he worked in the British Library writing that book. He was not a political leader, he was a philosopher. Huh? And how much effort went into this, and how much he didn't care for his own personal things, comes from the fact that when he died, there was not enough money to buy a coffin for him. See, this is, he may not be a Vedantin. This is a true principle of a man who gives up everything to do research. That is the meaning.
Thank you, sir.
So, maybe I think the story is anyways like an allegory. But just for curiosity, did like does the story say that Nachiketa actually die, or did he just like walk over to Yamalok? Because if he would have actually died, then Yama would have picked him up himself.
Yes. So in this case, he did not die by natural means. He transferred himself to the world of death.
Okay.
Because if you're right, if he had died naturally, then Chitragupta would have opened the records and said to him, hey, he's coming, this fellow.
Yeah.
That means he appeared suddenly into the world of death. Correct.
Just wanted to know, as a follow up of like last lecture, when you were doing Mandukya, I wanted to ask one thing that so from somewhere else I heard that like consciousness is more like a witness, and manas or mind is actually the one which is going through the three stages. So the fourth stage is not actually a stage; it's more like a witness which witnesses all the three other states. Uh,
I
is
think
that interpretation also an equally valid, or it's not so?
from my understanding, that's not a valid interpretation of the Mandukya. You see, it's like this. The mind, what you said, the mind, cannot survive or exist without consciousness.
Right.
Consciousness has to be there for the mind to be aware. A
Right.
mind without awareness means without consciousness.
Yeah.
So, even when we talk of up to Shushupti, we are talking about the mind only. But you can only say consciousness because without consciousness, neither the waking state without awareness.
Yes,
Neither the
that is what
waking
is illumining all.
it is the illuminator. In Turiya, there is only the illuminator. None of the other things. No, the mind does not exist. Therefore, the Upanishad also declare yan manasana manyute, that which even the mind cannot understand. Some other Upanishad.
And like, are there any simple techniques to achieve that state?
If you ask me, simple technique. We'll come that later.
Okay.
Let's not
Okay.
get into the technique now. Okay.
Okay.
When we come to the practical parts like yoga, we'll
Uh-huh.
deal with that. Huh? Okay.
So actually, like I have been trying to do like basic meditation, like just some basic asanas and pranayam, and then I've tried to
Good.
focus on my breath.
Right.
But
Very
like
good beginning.
it helps me calm my mind. But as such, I haven't achieved any big insight by that. But it helps through like if there is some difficult
Believe me,
situation in life.
believe
Uh,
me, for most people, it has only gone up to there. Don't
okay.
get worried. There are various aspects to it, and it takes time also. When you sow a seed, it takes time for it to sprout and become a tree, right? So in this matter also, one has to keep working, and one day it may strike. Who knows?
Okay.
Mm. Be patient.
Okay.
Mm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, sir, I wanted to ask from the Katha Upanishad. So, what we have discussed today, when Nachiketa's father, Vishvajashravasa, so when
Vajashravasa.
Vajashravasa, yeah. So when he initially performs the sacrifice, then Nachiketa catches him and says that, yeah, you are only giving useless stuff. Why don't you give? What would you do if it was me? So when the father decides to send Nachiketa to Yamaraj, okay, to Yama. So in that point in time, doesn't he show that he is not just giving useless things? Like at that point in time,
Absolutely. Absolutely, he does. That that is the point when he's actually performed the Vishvajit sacrifice. This point, when he says to Yama, to Nachiketas, go to Yama, he has done it. But
yes,
he required this push from Nachiketas to go there.
yes. So I also want to ask that when Nachiketa does, uh, go there, and then the Vishwajit sacrifice is complete, right? Now, what does Vajashravasa expect, like the achievement, right? You said that to achieve the universe, right? To win
Which means,
Vishvajit,
which
Vishvajit,
means, yeah, which
yes,
means that Vajashravasa is still trying to be powerful enough to understand the entire universe. What he's missing there is that if he understands death, he's understood the entire universe. Because when that is touched, there is no more any ambition left in a human being to conquer the earth. One is already a Vishvajit. You have won the world because you have won over death. The most important thing which one cannot even think of winning over.
right. That is the
That is what Nachiket wins.
yes. Nachiket wins that.
Yes. And what
Nachik-
qualifications are required to win that? As we read the Upanishad, you will see. And then you go back and read the Upanishad, maybe. But otherwise, next session we'll see what are required.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Not bad. The young people are working on it.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
So, sir, I was wondering, like, when we read these allegories and texts, so it is very open to our perception, like our understanding of what this person would have said. Then this he would, like, in case of Nachiketa's father, we could have just thought that he was just angry and he said that, and then there was this other option that he
No,
knew that what he wanted to experience death, so he could
no, no,
figure
no, no,
out.
no, 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 no. In these Upanishadic allegories, if you go by what is written, there is hardly a chance of you misinterpreting it if you follow the process. Yeah, because the words are precise. They're not saying he's angry. They're only saying that when he asked him 3 times, he said, "Okay, I give you away to death." So the allegorical presentation in this Upanishad does not say anything about anger. So there is no need to interpret it that way at all.
So
So
we don't have to build context around it.
no, you don't have, because the context is very accurate in the Upanishads. They don't go by any unusual or imaginary concepts. Uh, what did you say? Just build up a
Context.
context. They move exactly in what context what is being said is very accurate. It's also because of the language. This particular language is so accurate, it leaves little place for what do you call that?
Misinterpretation.
Not misinterpretation. It can be misinterpreted. Uh, no, speculation.
Okay. That changes a lot. So when I read text, I don't have to then make any context. Okay. I've been doing it wrong then.
No,
Okay.
not wrong. That's also one way of looking at it. What you must understand is that uh, the Upanishads, which are the essence of the Vedic texts, have been interpreted mm, by different teachers in different ways because they were masters of the language and they knew how to play with the word. Not so much because of what is written. Like in one Upanishad, there is one sentence where, therefore, Tat Tvamasi, you are that. Shankara, the great interpreter of Advaita Vedanta, uh, interprets it as Tat Tvamasi, you are that. You are not different from that, the supreme reality. Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya says also the same thing, although he put some conditions on it, that we still conditioned, but we can touch the unconditioned. Madhvacharya, who is a dualist, because of his expertise in Sanskrit grammar, says that Tattvamasi in this context can also be written as Itattvamasi, which means you are not that. So, apart from this grammatical fights, as such, if you take the body of this, look, what would you say if I want to add one I to the Tat and say it is Itattvamasi, you are not that. But that is because he has to prove a point, so he's trying to interpret it that way. When we study the Upanishad, we should not try to prove any point. We should try to go with the flow and figure out what is the Upanishad trying to say. Since you asked me about the context, I'm discussing this. You should actually study Sanskrit. Yeah. Because
I do want to, but
it's a beautiful language. It's a wonderful language. You'll see how one little change in a syllable can change the meaning of the word entirely.
thank you, sir.
Sir, I have a question from the last session. So
Yeah.
I came across a fifth state being mentioned. It's called
What?
a fifth state,
Turiya. Yeah.
Turiyateet, which says which happens when we carry the deep meditative state within us all the time, even in the wakeful state. So,
Uh, not really. Not really. See, uh, Turiya cannot even be called a state, but the states we discussed in detail were the waking, Jagrat, dream, deep sleep. Right. So when you say Turiya, what I meant, what is the Upanishad is trying to say, not that you can feel the Turiya in waking state. What it's trying to say is, now I have to go back to the whole context. What they're trying to say is, see, in waking state you are conscious. There is a witness. Dream state you are conscious. There is a witness witnessing the dream. Deep sleep, you're not conscious at that point because there is no, you don't know whether you are experiencing it except when you wake up. So it's almost unconscious, almost, but it is not unconscious because deep down there seems to be a witness who, when he wakes up, remembers the blissful sleep, even though it doesn't remember at that point while one is in Sushupti. What I was trying to say is, imagine the state of Sushupti plus the awareness of it at that point, not when you wake up. That could be called Turiya. What I'm trying to say also, what the Rishi is trying to say, the Upanishad is also, that it cannot therefore be attained through deep sleep. It can be attained only when we think about it consciously in the waking state. That's what they're trying to say. Otherwise, through deep sleep, everybody would love to go to Turiya through deep sleep. While we respect and understand the functions of deep sleep, the awareness that is not there if that can happen during deep sleep. Now, this can be thought about only in the waking state. In the deep sleep, you cannot think about it. When you have thought about it consciously many, many times, and when you go to sleep, you go to sleep with the idea that today I want to witness this. Perhaps one day one sees what is Turiya. In Vedantic terms, the great teachers have also said, when the mind has no other desire, when all desires have ended, it is not grasping anything at all, then in deep sleep it may realize the Turiya, because it is not, you know what I mean. That's what I meant.
May I just add to this?
Huh?
May I just say something regarding this?
Yes, Professor. Nice
Yeah,
to
no,
see you.
no,
Ah,
no. I mean, I think the reference he's bringing to is, when I heard, I'm not very certain also, but in one form of Kaya Kalpa yoga, they essentially practice this meditation, and they talk about going to stages of Turiya and Turiyateet when they're sitting down in meditation, and the form is that when you're in Turiya, you imagine that you're the witness, and Turiyateet, you're the witness, but you're merged with the Supreme, kind of thing, something like that.
these are only two words
Yeah, two
used.
words. So this is, I think maybe in that context he's got this and talked
Yeah,
about it.
and Kayakalpa has nothing to do with Turiya actually.
I know, but essentially that is the way they practice it.
Yeah. Kayakalpa is basically rejuvenation of the system, of the human system, which now in Kerala in some places they are charging 10 lakhs and 20 lakhs. So if you charge 20 lakhs, you can easily become Turiyateet. But you are right, there is a word called Turiyateeta, which means when one is fully in Turiya, then there is no Turiya, no sleep, nothing, no deep sleep. So therefore it's called Turiya, beyond. Because when you say Turiya, again you are defining a state. The real Turiya is beyond any states. That is what.
So my question is about you said that for knowing something about mind, we have to start with that I don't know. So every time we have to know about mind, we have to start with I don't know, so that we can concentrate. Okay.
Not every time, but we must understand this fact. You need not repeat, I don't know, I don't. No. We should understand the fact that unless we start with a clean slate, saying, let me figure out because I have not understood, then I may not be able to proceed towards understanding. That is what I mean. Not that before starting you must say, I don't know. No, no, no. That would sound pretty funny. If you go to an interview, suppose, and somebody asks you, do you know about, let's say, some question like, do you know anything about magnetism? And you say, no, no, I don't know. No, that is not what I meant. You understand? That's what I meant.
So my question was just about this, like that I think it is answered. My question was about didn't we always start with the I don't know, then keep reinventing the same thing again and again?
Not repeating the word, but the attitude. Because if I say I already have concluded, then I cannot do research, right? So I say, okay, let me look at this. You don't have to keep repeating it's an attitude which has to be developed, by which you say, since I'm going to figure something out, I won't start with the idea that I know about it. Let me look into it, explore, and figure out what it is. That's what I meant. Of course, we know many things.
Yes.
We know many
Yes.
things. It's not a
Yes. Yes. So information maybe we have, but we have to have that attitude that I don't know, and we have.
That's what I meant. You're right. And then we won the game.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So I think now we can wind up for the day, and tomorrow we have another. Yeah. So we'll continue with the first boon of Nachiketa. First question. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Thank you, sir.
I'm
Thank
enjoying
you,
your
sir.
session.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.